I'm going Bowser, Sephiroth, and Super Saiyan KO Canon, and them best believe that when I'm done, they know that I ain't playing with them anymore. I'm going Kamehameha and shit. Destructiveness, I ain't the one to fuck with.
What's up, my wizard Dev from MTG, that channel at the bottom there, and we have got today something like everyone wants to see, apparently. This is Esper Control, and it's probably one of the decks, if not the deck, to beat in the new standard. Everyone's been wondering how Esper translates into the new standard, and it turns out pretty well, even with the loss of some of its key players. It loses Thoughtseize, and it loses Hero's Downfall, but I think that Esper, all in all, doesn't lose too much of its functionality, so let's take a look at it. I think this deck is actually incredibly powerful. We're playing 4 creatures in our Esper build, which is less than some Esper builds will play, but everyone's going to play at least 4, because you're going to play 3 or 4 copies of Jay's Friend's Prodigy. I mean, that's a given. You got to play the guy, if not the most important creature in Standard, one of the top 2 or 3, you know? Just so super powerful. Everything he does at every stage of the game is very good, you know? Looting is something we want to do as a control deck. Flipping him is very, very easy, and he facilitates his own flip, obviously. And once you do flip him, his +1 is way better than we imagined when he first came out, and being able to recast spells is absolutely crazy in a control deck, or really any deck, you know. We see this in J-Sky, a more aggressive variant, but he's just good in everything because he's so relevant at every point of the game. So there's a reason why Jace is so expensive, and I really hope that he goes down, but that's hard to predict because Jace is going to be important for a long time to come. And one Silumgar the Drifting Death in the main deck. Good to have a very stable, hex-proof flying threat later on in the game. You know, once we really take control of the game, this guy can end it, not in a hurry, obviously. He puts him on a 7-turn clock, which isn't great, but is a reliable threat, stays on the board forever, and can wipe out like small dudes, you know. Good against a lot of the aggro decks in the format. Mono-red aggro is still a thing. Somehow it survived the rotation without Lightning Strike, Searing Blood, Stoke the Flames. It's still out there, though. Still a problem. And so it takes out a lot of what Mono Red's running. Obviously, it takes out Eldrazi Scion tokens, so that's pretty awesome, too. It takes out, you know, Thopters and stuff. And Hammerback Walker does hurt us a lot as a control deck, so, you know, I really like Silumgar the Drifting Death as an inclusion, at least as a one-of here. Before I move on, I do want to mention that some Esper decks are going to play at least 2 copies of Fathom Feeder at the very low end of their curve. Good against aggro, and just as nothing to sneeze at, and provides you value later in the game. Fathom Feeder is the kind of card that an Esper deck would usually want to play, but our first couple of turns, I kind of want to be establishing a little bit of control, which this helps do, but I want to counter their spells early game. That's why we're playing 4 of a card that only some Esper mages are playing 4 of. You'll see. But anyway, Fathom Feeder, I have put it in the sideboard here because I'm not really sure how great aggro is. I've already mentioned that mono-red aggro is still has a presence in the format, you know, it's still a thing. And I do think the green-red landfall deck is pretty fast and actually shows a lot of promise. And there's a couple other things, you know, maybe the mono-white aggro, but I think we do very well against that. So, and possibly even the mono-green Stompy, which I want to do a deck on here pretty soon. But yeah, aggro possibly a thing, but I'm just not really sure what tier aggro is on and how much we'll ultimately have to worry about it. Now, at FNMs and stuff, aggro is definitely a problem, so I can understand putting Fathom Feeder in the main for that, you know, but I think that Fathom Feeder serves a lot more of a purpose on the board, and we can just like Clash of Wills early game instead of, you know, devoting our second turn to a creature, which, you know, if we're going to do that, Jace is definitely the better option. 5 Planeswalkers in the main deck. This went from Esper Dragons to Esper Super Friends, more or less. A lot of people are abandoning the Dragon strategy, and I can definitely see why, although Silumgar Scorn is still such an important and powerful card, you know. But that being said, the Planeswalkers are out of this world in black and white, so we're just to get it out of the way. We're playing 1 copy of Sorin, you know. I was playing 2 to begin with because I really like just being able to make a thing, you know. But we can do that with Gideon, and that makes everything else that Sorin does not super desirable. We want to ultimate Sorin, but while he is in play, his +1 isn't like great or anything, but it's good to have him sort of just as a backup, you know. If he hits the board later on in the game, he's definitely going to do a lot of work for us, you know. And just by, you know, putting a thing into play, and then, you know, next turn doing the +1, then we can get, you know, 3 life back, which is really good, deal some damage. So I'm not entirely adverse to Sorin. I really, really like him in the deck. I just don't want to play too many copies of him. But the heavy hitters, we're playing 2 copies of Gideon and 2 copies of Ob Nixilis. Now, I want to talk about Ob Nix first. Ob Nixilis is crazy. He's my pick for probably the best card in BFZ. It's either him or Gideon. I mean, one way or the other. It's one of these 2 cards. And Ob Nix is just, I always want to see him. Great every time he hits the board. Takes out the biggest threat on the table that's not, you know, hexproof and destructible, which is not too much in this format. So he'll almost always take out the biggest threat on the other side of the table. He's good card advantage, you know, which is, control decks want to kill their guys, and they want to gain card advantage. And this card does both of those things, which is absolutely perfect in a control deck. Obnixilis has been a house, and that ultimate's fine. Like, people are putting down the ultimate's totally fine, especially when we're drawing a bunch of cards. You know, there's going to be a lot of cards drawn, is all I'm saying. Whether we draw, 3 cards in a turn or not, we're only playing, like, dig through time. We're not playing too any other, draw a card abilities or anything like that. But just the ability to, grind the game out, I mean, it puts them on a clock one way or the other. That's 4 damage every turn cycle, and that's really good. His ultimate's fine. But while you're getting to his ultimate, everything else he does is crazy. And then Gideon is obviously, like, free creature every turn, no loyalty spent. That's insane, once we can start grinding the game out. This is really good after we wipe the board, or, if we can play it and then wipe the board, it's still good then, Turns into something that takes away a quarter of their starting life total. That's pretty awesome. He also does everything a control deck wants to do. You won't be using the emblem too much, but just putting a free creature into play with no loyalty every turn is that's really, really good, it turns out. So yeah, Gideon is crazy. Quick note, yet again, some people are going to play 1 copy of Narset Transcendent, and some people will play a copy of Ugin. The community's kind of split on what to do in this situation. People don't necessarily like Ugin that much in this deck, as they brought the curve down a little bit, especially the ones that play Fathom Feeder in the main deck. But I put Ugin in the sideboard. I'm not really sure in this format what he does against like Huge Eldrazi and stuff, but not really sure how much we're going to see Huge Eldrazi. We'll have to wait on that. Definitely some people are going to try to build it. So Ugin's not great against those, We are playing a copy of Stasis Snare, which I'm not really sure that I like its interaction with Ugin that much. And with Narset, really, really good in the mirror match, and is really good on pseudo card advantage, which is something a control deck wants. But I just like it more in the mirror match than I like it anywhere else. If I'm going to play a 4-mana Planeswalker, I'm going to play Gideon, or at least I'm going to want to see Gideon on the 4th turn against a lot of the decks in the format, more so than Narset. So I put Narset in the board, although I definitely think she's a very important role player for the deck. 25 spells. That's a lot of spells in the deck. We're playing 3 copies of Duress, which you won't see in every Esper control deck, which baffles me. I think Duress is still incredibly good. Obviously, we don't want to like rip board wipe out of the mirror match's hands or anything like that. Like some decks will play Duress for, Abzan and stuff like that. But we definitely still want to get certain cards out of their hand, especially Planeswalkers. We don't have to worry about countering. I think Duress is still an important card, although you could play Despise, although I put Despise in the board. Now, if the format is as creature heavy as it might appear to be, I think Despise will be an important card, but I really want to just keep it in the board. We'll have to see. And I didn't play any copies of Transgress the Mind, another thing I think might be pretty good in the format, but I want my, Disruption to be my 1-drop. I really do. I'm coming around on that train of thought. So I'm going with just 3 Duress here, and this also helps, pull stuff out of aggro's hand. We don't have to worry about Tarka's or Dramoka's command, Against some decks, we don't have to worry about a Jutai's command, which is really good against, like, Jeskai. So, I still think it's important to play Duress. That's all I'm getting at. 4 copies of Clash of Wills, and yes, 4 full copies of Clash of Wills. There are a few people in the community that are totally on this train, and I think it's the right way to go, because the decks that go smaller, like really, really small in this format, I've already mentioned Mono Red Aggro, and I think Landfall is a thing. I know I'm talking super fast, but this is an important point. I think that 4 Clash of Wills is something that has divided a lot of people. You either play 2 or you play 4. Some people play 3, I'm going with 4, because I want to counter their 2-drop. Like, just almost no matter what, I want to have a reliable way to counter their 2-drop. You see, the removal at 2 mana is, like, pretty thin. We can play Swift Reckoning, we can play Gideon's Reproach, we can play Ultimate Price. We don't have too many more options than that. I think Swift Reckoning is probably fine, although at the 2-drop, we won't be able to play it at instant speed, which is something we ideally want to do with that card. Gideon's Reproach just doesn't cover all the options we want for it to do in the main deck. And then Ultimate Price, I think, definitely gets worse in this format. I can still see a 1-of, but it's just not incredibly reliable. I could definitely see playing 1 Ultimate Price and 3 Clash of Wills, but 3, Clash of Will is basically, another Clash of Will is basically, on our 2nd turn, the same thing as an Ultimate Price, but better. You know what I mean? The Clash of Wills has importance a few turns even more than it did in the last format where people played 2 and 3 of them. So I still think Clash of Wills might be the best counter spell in the entire format, and I'm playing a playset. We're playing but 2 copies of Scatter to the Winds. If you want to do 3 Clash of Wills and maybe 3 Scatter to the Winds, I could see that, But 2 Scatter to the Winds has been all I really need to counter important spells. We've got enough removal to sort of not care that much. We're running, 6 total counter spells in the main deck, which is about where we want to be anyway in a control deck nowadays. Even in the last format, there'd be people playing like 2-of Dissolve in control decks. And I see the same thing happening here, especially late in the game. If we can awaken a land, that's really, really good. But we don't need these clogging up our hand for, honestly, we don't. Just 2 is fine. 3 copies of Ruinous Path and 1 copy of Stasis Snare, which you do not see every day. Now, Jace cannot recast a Stasis Snare, which is kind of lame, I agree, but it's really good to have an instant speed exile that guy. This works against Hangerback, obviously. When it comes back into play, it does nothing, so because it doesn't have any counters anymore. It just dies and nothing happens. That's good. Ruinous Path is awesome against all the Planeswalkers we're definitely going to see in this format, and Awakening it's really good, but I like to have at least 1 instant speed option that does something like this. And a lot of decks are going to play just 3 copies of Ruinous Path anyway, so it's not like I'm taking away a copy of Ruinous Path to play a Stasis Snare. Maybe I'm blind, but I love Stasis Snare. I think it's good to have an instant speed option like this. 1 copy of Utter End, which you'll see a couple of copies of in some Esper decks. Notice that I'm doing this because the community is really trying to build Esper Control as well as it possibly can right now, and there's a lot of differing opinions and stuff, but most people are going to play at least the 1 copy of Utter End. A really important spell in this format, again, takes out Hangerback Walker without you having to worry about it, which we lost, a lot of decks lost Magma Spray as an option, so we're looking for different ways to take out Hangerback Walker, and this is just one of them. Obviously, it takes out everything else, too, so that's really important. Planeswalkers included, just Utter End is a good card in this format. It was a good card in the last format. I don't know why I didn't see as much play as it probably should have. Even Esper Control didn't necessarily play this, and sometimes they'd even play, like, Sildengar's Command over it, but I think Utter End is a great option in this format. 3 copies of a Jutai's Command. Now, this one is pretty much universal, to be honest, and some will even play 4 copies of a Jutai's Command, depending on how prevalent aggro is. And if they're playing, multiple copies of Fathom Feeder, this gets a little bit more important too. But we're playing 3 copies. I think it's just incredibly good against aggro if we can, on the 4th turn, counter a creature and gain 4 life, or draw a card and gain 4 life if they don't cast a creature. That's fine too. So, it's really fantastic against that deck specifically, and allows us to get our Jace back in times of trouble, which is important as well. 3 copies of Languish and 1 copy of Planar Outburst, something else that pretty much everyone is universally doing. We all thought 4 Languish would be a thing. And there is another Languish in the board so that you can just really rail aggro. Our first game against aggro isn't great, but after boards we can just clean house, It's totally fine. So 3 copies of Languish in the main board is okay. And the 1 copy of Planar Outburst is awesome because, we're playing Ruinous Path, we're playing Scour to the Winds, our lands will be awakened some of the time. So if we can not even cast it for its awaken cost, just leave nothing on the board but our awaken lands, that's pretty awesome, man. When we can awaken it, the card is actually really, really good. So, yeah, at least 1 copy of Planar Outburst, I think is a definite. And 4 copies of Dig Through Time. I talked extensively about this in the last video that included Dig. I don't want to rehash all of that right now. Just Dig Through Time is probably even more relevant than it was, in the past 6 months in this format. Yes, Delve gets worse, but yes, Dig gets better. Honestly, the format is much bigger, much slower than it was just a couple of months ago, which really lends itself to a card like Dig Through Time. Even if Delve gets a little bit worse, it looks like, but I'm just not really sure how many people are going to be playing these Eldrazi that care about whether you delve something, that remains to be seen. So in the meantime, in a bigger format, Dig Through Time is crazy, and there's a reason it was just banned in Legacy, it was banned in Modern months ago. The card is just the real deal, and we want to play as many of them as we're legally allowed to do. 26 lands in the deck. Some decks will play 27. I could totally see that, but we're not playing Ugin in the main deck. We really don't need to go so high, so 26 is fine, and we can pack another spell or 2 in there, I think, pretty easily, especially with how good the mana is in this format for a deck like Esper, we get 8 copies of fetch lands, and we get 8 different battle lands or tango lands, whatever you call them. We get Shambling Vent, which is just insane in a deck like this. Esper wants this so bad. This might be the best new inclusion for Esper, Shambling Vent. Honestly, I say that seriously. It might be the best new card for this, except for maybe like Ob. This is the thing, right? Shambling Vents is so real in this deck. Trust me, you'll see. Here's a working sideboard. Now, obviously, the sideboard is very, very important in control decks, and this one has an awful lot of options, We probably got at least 10 options that I didn't use in the sideboard, but it all sort of depends on your local metagame, but this is sort of a basic working sideboard that covers most of the things that we're likely to see. Here are your power rankings. Now, I do have some bad news for you. The deck is very expensive. It costs about as much as the Bant Control deck I made about a week or 2 ago cost. It's about 600, if not a little higher, a little north of 600 to build this off TCG Player. So off of a lot of other sites, it's going to be even more expensive. So there is that to consider. A very expensive deck, but you pay to win in Magic sometimes, and this is definitely the case here. You pay for the power, and the power is real in this deck. I definitely, like I said before, I'm going to reiterate, I think this is one of the decks to beat in the format. You see a lot of very, very high scores. A final score of 70 on the deck, which is very, very good in a competitive deck. And you even see a 10 in the defense department. We are very well rounded, and that has a lot to do with the format, which I think, like everyone else pretty much by this point, slows down just a turn, by a turn or two, but probably a turn and a half. You know, it slows down just a little bit, and that really lends itself to control, which can sometimes be a house at the beginning of formats, you know, and this is definitely, I think, going to be the case in this format. Esper Control looks very strong and very well equipped to deal with a lot of the threats coming its way. Now, after that, maybe we need a bit of a palate cleanser, I would say. Probably going to do something for $10 next time. What I'm thinking about doing next time is $10 Eldrazi. You know, I think that'll probably be something a lot of people are excited for. And I've been toying around with it. Whatever I come up with is going to be weird. But I'm thinking about putting it alongside an actual competitive constructed Eldrazi deck. Either in a two-part video or perhaps, you know, just as a double deck tech. So I'm really excited for that. I've got that mostly figured out. There's still some, you know, I got to bang some stuff out. But we'll see. That's probably what I'm going to do next time. $10 Eldrazi. That's all I'm saying. Well, that was lengthy. Pretty much all I've got for now, I want to say. If you enjoyed the content, here's what you should do. You should just hit that thumbs up button. That's really, really cool. And you're awesome when you do it. And it helps us a lot. And you should share. That's even better, actually. Sharing is awesome. And you would not believe that sharing would help us as much as it does, but it does. And you should comment, because I like to know how you feel on things. That's important, especially if I screwed up somewhere, or if I'm a genius. Let me know either way. And if you haven't done it yet, please subscribe. Just come on, man. Subscribe. We're trying to get huge, and we are doing that, but we need your help to continue doing that. So do all those things. That was also lengthy. And I'll catch you guys later. I'm Deb from SBMTG. Thanks for watching, my wizards.